Among the more credible of eyewitnesses to the UFO phenomena are pilots. Indeed, it is a little-known fact, but over 3,500 military and civilian pilots have stepped forward over the years to officially report something so unique, so different to what they are normally accustomed to seeing, that they have labelled it as a UFO. It's rare for pilots to talk publicly about such encounters, least of all in front of a camera held by UFO researchers. But veteran civilian pilot David Hastings had no such qualms.
We'd been to the Second Air Division, a convention in McAfee in New York, so we were slowly making our way back at a nice easy pace. We decided we wouldn't fly at night, so I'd landed at Dayton for my first night stop and then at Albuquerque on the second night. Our Grand Canyon really happened as a piece of luck, because I was talking to the American girl in air traffic at Albuquerque, and she heard my English accent, and she said, "Oh, I suppose you want to fly the canyon?" And I said, "Well, yes, I would like to do that." So she advised us then that I should fly the canyon first and then land at Grand Canyon for fuel, because if I went the other way round and landed at Grand Canyon and asked to fly the canyon, I would possibly be told no. So yes, we had a look at the at the Grand Canyon itself. But the incident happened, I'd refueled at Grand Canyon Airport. I was just back up to my assigned height of 10,500 feet on the airway on Victor 12. And we passed over Lake Mead, and I suppose we're about 70, 80 miles short of the Mojave Desert when it happened. It began, of course, we both realized that there was something coming in our 12 o'clock at us at high speed, very high speed. Which at that part of the world, you're not used to them coming exactly head-on, but obviously, again, you know, both of us had the experience of a military jet coming at us at a different angle at speed. So you were quite used to seeing what in 1 second was a tiny speck on the windshield, and within a second was a very large aeroplane. So, you know, we looked at it, saw the speck coming, but it came so quick. When we first saw it, we suddenly realized it was on top of us. So we pushed. I pushed hard. I was flying, and David, as my co-pilot, also pushed hard, and we vanished, as I say, under the coaming of the instrument panel. We were convinced that that was it, that we were going to have a mid-air, that there'd be an almighty bang, and the tail would go, and that would be it, and that would be the end of our flying days. But I mean, as I say, bear in mind, I was on the airway, I was under a radar service, and I had no warning of any conflicting traffic whatsoever. But then, of course, that was when, Graham, it started to get very odd. It went over the top of us, a large shadow, a very black shadow. It darkened the whole of the cockpit, and the sky above us, of course, was, as I say, was clear blue sunshine.
Was there any kind of shockwave associated with that?
No, that was the funny thing. There was no sound, and there was no shockwave whatsoever. A little bit of turbulence, but that could have been me pushing hard anyway. My first concern was to get back up to my assigned height before somebody started to ask us as to what I was doing. Yes, I mean, that was your instant reaction. Our other instant reaction was, well, you know, thank goodness, what happened? There was, as I say, there was no bang. It's missed us. So yeah, it was I wouldn't say fear. I mean, when it happened, we were both convinced that we were going to have a mid-air, because it came exactly at our 12 o'clock. We slowly came back up from under the combing. I regained height, and we both said, "What the heck was that?" But then again, the mystery deepened, I think, because we both suddenly said, "There's something out to port on my side of the aeroplane." But we couldn't see anything, and yet we both sensed that something was formating on us. Something was moving. It started out of the peripheral vision, but certainly it was such a strong feeling. Both of us were looking out my side of the aeroplane. I think it was more than sixth sense. I think we both felt that whatever was there was moving so fast that the human eye couldn't actually register it in detail, but could register that something was definitely moving. We thought it was going, you had a sensation it was going up and down beside us.
Right.
But I mean, that sensation lasted so long, and it was such an odd feeling, and we were both convinced about it, that I said to David, as I say, you fly the aeroplane, because I've got my camera, my still camera, back in the back end of the aeroplane. So I had time to unstrap, go back, pick up my ordinary still camera, come back, strap in, and we both said it's still there. So I took one picture, and then, as I say, we waited, and then suddenly we both said it's there again. We felt or sensed or could see a movement, but we couldn't focus on it. So I took a second picture, and I suppose that whole incident must have lasted for 4 minutes, I suppose. That was, so it was one of a 36 exposure film, of which we'd slowly taken. Most of the shots on that film were of the canyon, obviously. It had been sightseeing shots. The first one had nothing on it, and it was the second picture. I think the reason why we definitely took two was because we felt, because we felt there was something interesting happening, we wanted to have at least a second or a third shot. Maybe I should have taken 3, 4, 5, 6. But we wanted to check that there was nothing in the cockpit, like, as I say, an oxygen mask or anything else that was showing a reflection on that side window. And as you saw from the first picture, there is absolutely nothing that could have made that shape out of a reflection. About 3 days later, we went to a party at the US Naval Base at Treasure Island, and I took the photographs, as I say, there, and the US Navy officer asked if he could keep them for 3 days, and I said yes, as long as I can definitely have them back before I go back to the UK.
Would this be a senior Navy officer? Can you
I think he was a I think he was a lieutenant. So no, he wasn't. He possibly wasn't. He was about middle, as I say, middle ranking.
Yes.
As I say, I've forgotten his name now. But again, after 3 days, when we went back to Treasure Island, and he produced my photographs, but he just wouldn't give us anything. It was no comment, and we said, "Well, come on, surely you can give us something else." As I say, what do you actually think it was? No comment. I mean, whether it was because he genuinely didn't know what it was, or whether...
In which case, why couldn't he tell you that?
Yeah, quite. Later on in the evening, on that evening when we went back to pick them up, we were talking to a US naval pilot, and he was looking at the picture, and of course he said, "Well, I can tell you what the whiteness over the top is. I say that is vapor caused by a rapid rate of climb," which we could obviously understand that, and we thought, well, yes, that
makes sense.
That makes sense. No, I mean, I suppose to be honest, it was semi-visible. In other words, it was moving at a speed where your human eye could sense movement, but it couldn't focus on it. But we were lucky enough on one shot, the camera actually caught it. Blurred, but it caught it. So, I mean, it certainly was a flying object. It certainly was unidentified, but it was definitely there, and it was solid. But the rest of it remains a mystery, although as pilots, I suppose, as I say, one accepts that, yes, there are UFOs. And I think our picture proved it, I think. Certainly, I mean, of all the... and on that trip back, we were making a widescreen story, but I mean, and that picture actually features in it. But nobody has ever queried it, and I think mainly because you can say, well, I have the picture, so I know what I saw, I prove what I saw. I can prove it. Here is the photograph. But it still remains a mystery. Nobody has ever explained to us as to why there was no sound, why there was no airflow or turbulence, and why we couldn't actually focus on it, why it didn't come and hover beside us and stay stock still, so we could actually see it in detail. Nobody's ever explained that to us, Graham, at all. Although some of your pictures and the analysis is intriguing, I think, of that photograph.
Interestingly, as a result of our publishing David's account in UFO magazine, a reader in North America submitted this photograph of a UFO taken over Brazil some years before. Compare the two. There is a striking resemblance. Is it just possible that the Mojave UFO and that photographed over Brazil may be one and the same? If debunkers are to be believed, all eyewitnesses to purported UFO activity are to be dismissed. No matter that pilots are skilled professional observers, no matter that over 3,500 pilots fail to sight Venus, conventional aircraft lights seen under unusual atmospheric conditions, space debris, or other exotic causes. When one considers that only 10% of ordinary members of the public who think that they have actually seen a UFO take the time and effort to report their sighting officially, would the same percentage figure apply to professional pilots? We think not. Hence, to accumulate over 3,500 official UFO and pilot encounters, a figure incidentally first reported back in 1990, should be seen for what it truly is, a staggering body of evidence that few can ignore, unless, of course, you happen to be a debunker. It is late evening, and away in the distance, mysterious lights in the sky attract your attention. From afar, they look at odds with your surroundings, but as you zoom in for a closer look, and the lights steer ever closer, the mystery is soon resolved. Aircraft navigational lights, particularly those seen from the ground and at distance, can often lead some into mistakenly interpreting them as a UFO. The sky at night is often littered with aircraft and, coupled with chance observations of passing overhead satellites, it is little wonder that inexperienced observers on the ground below are often confused. Skywatches, however, can assist in educating people to the busy environment above. But what should one take on a skywatch? How best to prepare? Here, Russell Callahan teams with Graham Birdsall, editor of UFO magazine, to provide a few handy tips.
Skywatches can be great fun. So here's some practical guidelines to get the maximum enjoyment of what can be a pretty cold night out looking at the stars. And we hope other things as well. We're here on Otley Shevin, just outside of Ilkley. Although we have some light pollution in the area, we've not travelled many miles to give ourselves a fantastic view from horizon to horizon. Of course, it helps for those who are not used to skywatches to know exactly where the best place is to park your vehicle. Oh, and please try to avoid parking your vehicle by busy roads, especially at night. Those country lanes can be pretty hazardous. So, if you can't find a public spot to park your vehicle and you're looking at some private land, do get permission from the landowner or a farmer. As long as you do that, you shouldn't have too many problems. The last thing you need is an embattled farmer coming along and ushering you off in the middle of the night. Sound travels a great distance at night. The last thing householders or farmers want at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning is to hear the sound of a car radio blaring away. It can travel for miles. So please, keep noise to an absolute minimum. Another piece of safety information: don't wander off at night. It's important that you do not do that, simply because there are lots of hazards out in those fields. It's pitch black, you could fall over, sprain an ankle, and you've got problems. There are lots of essential items that you need to bring with you on a skywatch. One of those, most importantly of all, especially these days, is a mobile phone. But when you pitch your skywatch, at least make sure that you've got a good signal. It's pointless finding an ideal spot only to discover that your mobile doesn't work. Typical route map, even an A to Z. You don't have to travel many miles outside of a city's or a town's lights to get away from the pollution to find an ideal spot for a skywatch. So do take along a route map, especially handy if you're in an area that you're not too familiar with and you might get lost. Other things to take on board? Well, a pair of binoculars. 10 by 50 binoculars, just as good and a heck of a lot less expensive than some of the larger astronomical telescopes. These I've had for the best part of 15 years. They stood me in good stead and they're ideal, especially at night. Another piece of essential equipment, a torch. Ideally, take 2 torches with you. If you have to go wandering off, especially to spend a penny, take the torch with you. The last thing you want to have to happen is for that torch to go down, simply because you forgot to charge the batteries. Have some spare batteries handy just in case. If you're bringing along a camera, keep it in a camera case, especially if it starts to chuck it down late at night. I always like to bring along these. They're night vision binoculars. Now they're particularly good for looking at objects way up in the sky at distance, picking out strobe lights, navigation lights from what look curious lights in the sky at first, but through these you can pick out the strobes very, very easily. Indeed, we've had helicopters, police helicopters, flying over our region with the lights out, obviously monitoring somebody on the ground below. But when you put the night vision scopes on them, you can actually see the crew of the helicopter reflected by their instrument panels on board through night vision. They're expensive, but some of the handheld night vision sets that you can get these days are less than £200. It's always important when you're going on a skywatch to prepare for the elements, i.e. the weather. It can turn pretty treacherous at night. Tonight's not too bad. Temperatures hovering around about the mid-40s, but it's always nice to bring along something hot to drink. Have plenty of chocolate bars, especially if you're intending to stay out until the early hours. And one final piece of advice, I always recommend that youngsters do not come along on a skywatch. Those round about 15 or 16, fine, that's handy, but if you're here to look at the night sky, to check out the stars, check out satellites, check out, we hope, something odd, something unusual, the last thing you need is to turn around and a 4 or 5 year old or a 10-year-old is no longer there to be seen. So that's very, very important. But wherever you go for your skywatch, enjoy yourselves. That's the whole point of this exercise. Do take on board some of those guidelines and tips. Safety is absolutely paramount. How many should you take on board a skywatch with you? Well, I always like to think that 4 or 5 carloads of people is ample, especially if you're looking at a narrow lay-by where you're hoping to pitch camp for the night. If you are travelling some distance away from home, make sure that everybody is familiar with where you're going to. And it always helps, just in case, to let somebody back home know where you're going to as well. And with that, have a great skywatch, but a safe skywatch as well.
Organising the skywatch is one of those things that takes a little bit of planning. As we've already gone over the major points to remember about privacy and getting yourself organised. All that's fine. You can have all this wonderful equipment and go out there and hope to get some remarkable footage of something extremely unusual. But you need to get 1 or 2 things happy in your mind. It's like riding a bicycle, if you like. The equipment, your camera, the camera that you're using, or 1 of 2 or 3 cameras that you're using. On a skywatch, you need to be confident with the equipment. I suppose the first real pointer is a tripod. You don't have to spend a fortune. Something like this, about 40, 50 pounds. Nice sturdy legs, spirit levels on the head there. That lets you make sure things are level, because if you get one of the legs in the wrong position, it might look fine in the viewfinder wherever you're filming, but as you pull back you'll be creating hills and troughs that aren't really there. So nice and level, check the bubbles, firm ground, and away you go. Zooming into distant objects, the tripod's an absolute must. You need to be firm. Doesn't matter how steady a hand you've got when you're holding the weight of a camera, just your body's movement through simply breathing will create all sorts of shakes and wobbles on the camera. So once again, stick with the tripod, get it firm, plenty of adjustment on the tripod. They've all got the bit that goes up and down, so get comfortable to your eye. If you're fortunate like us and you've got the little screen there, well, look, there we are. Me watching you, watching him, watching me sort of thing. But if you've got the little viewfinder, then you can see that what you're filming is what you're getting. What you see on this screen is exactly what you're going to see on the TV when you get your footage home. So remember, the little black and white viewfinder, it's okay, but to get the real picture, this is a must. One thing to remember though, the viewfinder, it takes battery power out of the camera, so be prepared with batteries. If you've got a couple of batteries, make sure they're fully charged, know the limitations of your camera. The more you zoom, the more you have autofocus switched on. This all uses power, and those batteries will drain very, very quickly. Lithium-ion batteries are the modern standard now, sort of thing, and this little camera with the smallest battery that's available for it will give you an hour, reliable. You can buy bigger batteries. I've actually got one for this particular camera that, believe it or not, gives you 6 hours. Okay, it cost about £80, but one charge and you know you're going to be alright for all night with a skywatch, so well worth remembering. Extra batteries. The other thing, get to know where your controls are on your camera. Most modern camcorders are all switches and buttons at the back. It's alright having tons of little gadgets. Again, it's knowing what these things do, and get comfortable before you actually get out there in the field, know what you're doing and what each of those buttons will do. Another tip that I'd like to share with you that I think is a vast improvement on some of the older models of camcorder. Autofocus, we switch that off always. Manual focus, use this ring. You can see in the viewfinder, you can see on the little 3-inch monitor that your image is in focus. But when you're filming distant, if you've got an object in the sky, quickly appears in the sky and you think, oh, what do we do now? Don't go fumbling for the focus. Sony, JVC and Canon are all fitting this little infinity button. Dead easy. Pull the switch down and that sets the lens at its distant setting. So anything basically will be in focus. The great achievements of modern times is, I don't know whether we can pick it up in the viewfinder, we'll let you see the footage as we go along as well, but something that's come along these days. In the distance there is our local pub. With the flick of a switch we have night shot. And all of a sudden, details start coming into view that weren't there before. And we'll let you see the footage in reality during this actual piece. But as you can see, night shot, wow, what an improvement from basically nothing to being able to see almost in darkness. It's good, but it does have its limitations. Let's not forget, we might be filming distant objects, stars, planetary objects, whatever. The night shot's really a guide, but in essence it's alright for getting an idea of the background of the land where you are. If you're out in the countryside in the dark, it'll give you an idea where your horizon levels are, where the hills are. Stick with the normal lens, the normal settings on the camera, the manual settings. And the one that I like to keep referring people back to is exposure. That is something that you can control manually by hand. It's like opening and closing the iris on a 35mm camera. The wider the iris, the more light. The problem is, on a dark picture, on a dark night, the camera's automatic settings open wide and let every bit of light into the camera that's there. That doesn't necessarily work. If you take a look at this piece of footage, you can see we've been filming the moon. This is during the eclipse earlier on this year, the total lunar eclipse. By turning the f-stops down on the camera lens, then all of a sudden the detail of the surface of the moon becomes apparent. And what a difference. If we had the camera on automatic, all we see is the big white ball of light in the sky. Just to recap, get used to where the buttons are on the camera. Get used to where it stops, where it starts. Get used to what you see in the viewfinder when the thing's running. It's alright pointing and shooting your camera at an object in the sky and thinking you've got some marvellous footage and realising that it's been on pause for the last 2 minutes. Make sure you're aware that you know the camera's running, you know the noises it makes. Get a good tripod, get it steady, plenty batteries, plenty tapes, and the long and short of it, enjoy yourself. And good luck, because you never know, it might be your turn to catch something on camera next.
Skywatches need not necessarily take place during nighttime hours. Take, for example, this man, Peter Grant. Throughout most of last summer, Peter used a variety of camera lenses and filters to record the skies above his Manchester home in the north of England. Here are just a few sequences, gleaned from dozens of hours of footage, which Peter has kindly agreed to share among fellow UFO enthusiasts. If the mysterious objects filmed over Peter Grant's residence turn out to be some form of covert experimental craft, then that would come as no surprise to scientists and engineers who gathered at the University of Sussex, near Brighton, for the Advanced Propulsion Workshop in January of 2001. Some of the world's leading scientists in the field of electrogravitics were present, and so were we. Here's just a sample of what some of them had to say.
The Griffiths paper, which I know that Professor Petkov, are you Professor Petkov? It's my honor to know. Well, in this, in the second paper by Professor Petkov concerning the Griffiths, he states that it takes some 10 to the minus 15 of the meter to be the dipole in order to be effective in lifting. Because I read this paper by Petkov and Griffiths, and I was very much impressed about it. I would like to ask if there is any technique by which we could take advantage of this electrokinetic lifting force and shortcoming the burden of the 10 to the minus 15 of the meter. Have you got any ideas how we can proceed with this, which is very remarkable?
Probably the best way to answer this is tomorrow. I will address several probably ways to try to make use of that intrinsic connection between electromagnetism and gravity. And you know, the classical electromagnetic mass theory revealed such a connection between electromagnetism and inertia. So in fact, addressing the connection between electromagnetism and gravity or inertia, you're addressing both, but I believe that tomorrow is the best time.
The fourth thing is, even assuming we have a black box or black sphere out of some black project, you know, it has to have power going in order to convert the energy into another form of energy, which is the propulsion. We have to conserve our energy loss. And the fourth thing is, where's that power going to come from? What kind of scale of power are we going to need? Yes, okay. And what kind of technology would provide it? Now, obviously, in the early days, if you get solar panels, like they have on Mir and the space station, and you don't want to go too far out, and they say no further than Mars, then that's a well-tested technology, and as long as the sun shines, you're going to get power. And that might be doable for small missions and small payloads and small thrusters in the first generation. But if you want to do deep missions, the farther you get away from the sun, the power from the cells falls off exponentially, like a ski slope, from almost nothing. And you're going to need some other source. And obviously you are defeating the object if you take along a huge tank of chemicals that they're using as propellant, use them to generate electricity, because you're back to square one again. So it has to be, if not solar, then nuclear, because that's got 4 to 5 magnitudes more power per weight than a chemical system. So we're talking several thousand times more energy available in the same package, for the same weight and the same volume. And that's the whole problem then of technology being mature, technology being safe, being compact, being reliable, and that's a whole new can of worms which you will want to look at anyway for conventional space propulsion, space missions. Unfortunately, people are spending money on that, and they are looking at it for those reasons. But that technology will come across and plug in, hopefully, into the technology we might develop. But then, beyond that, there's a whole new raft of ideas that are coming up, which is the other part of the flip coin of this conference, which is zero-point energy and other unconventional energy sources, possibilities of vacuum extraction of energy from the vacuum, in which Hal here is an expert, and related ideas. It may be, and Professor Vigier has a very good paper to give on this tomorrow, that as well as getting a breakthrough in our propulsion systems, we might even have a breakthrough in our energy systems to power it. And if that happens, then the consequences, not just for space travel, but for our entire society and culture, are going to be extremely profound. And therefore, for those of you who are not so interested in space travel, but are interested in the applications that spin off from it, this might be the most rewarding part of the conference.
We had Einstein calculating the so-called spontaneous emission coefficient, the A coefficient. Then a certain amount of time went by, and stimulated emission was known even back then, and then that eventually led to lasers and so on. But spontaneous emission was still just considered something that you were just given. That was it. But research in zero-point energy finally recognized that spontaneous emission isn't so spontaneous. It's actually a form of stimulated emission, stimulated by vacuum fluctuations. So once that was recognized, which was recognized as a theoretical concept, then you had the idea of, well, it would really be great to control the spontaneous emission rate of excited atoms. And so once it was realized that atoms in an excited state are sort of like pencils standing on its end, and so fluctuations which knock it down, then came the idea in the 80s that, okay, well, we'll build a cavity, we'll eliminate the modes at that transition frequency, therefore we eliminate the zero-point energy in that mode. And therefore, if we put the atom in that particular cavity, it'll stay excited, and it won't spontaneously emit. So in fact, that started the whole field of cavity quantum electrodynamics, and now it's used to increase spontaneous emission rates by a factor of 100. So here's a case where actual practical application came by recognizing that vacuum fluctuation theory could be used to actually control something that was thought to be well understood and well known, but nobody realized you could get a handle on it. And so that's a nice transition where theory actually comes in and permits you to deal with something you've been dealing with for decades because you had a theoretical foundation in which you started to ask a new question and then came up with a new answer and then a new application. So this is not just, a few decimal places. I mean, it's just a big factor of 100. And also you can go the other way, you can speed up so-called spontaneous emission by even greater factors.
Back in March this year, we attended the 10th International UFO Congress and Film Convention, staged over 7 days in the casino resort of Laughlin, Nevada. Almost 30 leading international researchers and best-selling authors delivered lectures to a near-capacity 1,000-strong audience. Throughout the week, Congress delegates enjoyed special functions, such as the cocktail evening and the Grand Gala dinner, at which the EB Awards are presented to some of the year's top UFO film and video productions. Elsewhere, enthusiasts and the general public alike can often be found browsing through a wide variety of UFO and alien-related merchandise in the vendor's room. It was here that we managed to grab a few words with Ron Russell, one of America's leading experts on crop circles and a frequent visitor to England during the summer months. We began by asking what Ron thought of Colin Andrews' assertion, much publicised last year, that the vast majority of crop circles are nothing more than
hoaxes.
Yes,
it's disturbing because people have done very poor research in this area. When I first started going to the crop circles, I figured that most of them were man-made. I found evidence that they were, and I just went about my business because I thought they were marvelous places. I think the problem comes in when you say a figure, of a certain figure, 80%, 20%. That's not provable, and it's just a guess. A lot of formations, from my experience, are man-made, but they fall into different categories. There are hoaxes, forget about it, there's nothing happening, they're made for deception. But some are spiritual machines or hermetic devices or magical temples and they're made with higher intention, not a deception. So they can't be called hoaxes. We have to, as a community of researchers, come up with an understanding that there are many levels of man-made phenomena, just as there are many levels of beyond human phenomena. Could be ET, could be time travelers, could be astral beings from another dimension, could be fairy spirits and elementals, and I think it's all of the above. Some of the human-made formations have great power, a power to heal people, far beyond psychosomatic effect and placebo effect. The power we see in magnetometer fluctuations, anomalous readings in magnetometers, anomalous readings in microwave detectors, anomalous readings in our Trek 520 electrostatic detector, which doesn't happen in a hoax formation. There's another further piece of good evidence. Some of the human circle makers I've talked to do this for contact. They like the juju that they get in the middle of the night. I have gone out with them and watched. I don't make crop circles, but I watched them, and while I didn't see anything that particular night, they report that this indeed is really quite a puzzling part of their work. The magic is real. It is there. We've heard before if there's only one real one, but there are many more than that, and I'm not going to get into percentages. That's where Colin fell down, because he put a number on it, and you can't do that. You just don't know. And his estimation was confined really to England. I mean, we have 4 formations in North Dakota here in America, and Minnesota and Wisconsin, and these are in fields with no tram lines, with no access points, and photos have been taken where they're, how could that be? So there is a real phenomena, but I would encourage people to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Even in human facilitated formations, the magic is there. Contact opportunities are there. Balls of light and ships are seen by people in those formations. They go into a human facilitated formation and have healing and have epiphany and meet their guardian angel. And so let's get serious here. We have a great opportunity to learn about ourselves, to learn about the nature of illusion and deception at the edge of reality, or assumed reality. And I think it's time for us to grow up, embrace the whole phenomena. Some are magical devices, some are trashy hoaxes, some come from beyond. That's the way I see it.
Another interesting speaker to attend Congress was Bruce Stephen Holmes, co-author of a new book entitled Incident at Fort Benning. Bruce's co-author and principal character in the book, John Vasquez, was the subject of a filmed interview we conducted in Laughlin some 4 years ago. Until then, few had heard of John Vasquez, let alone his incredible story. Later, we will show a brief segment of our interview with John, but for now, let us hear Bruce Stephen Holmes describe how he first chanced upon John and what led him to take more than a passing interest in his remarkable story.
And basically, the book is about a very interesting situation that occurred in September 1st of 1977. And it was at Fort Benning, Georgia, where John was stationed as a recruit. And actually he was a volunteer, he wasn't really a recruit, but I use the word recruit. And when he first arrived at Fort Benning, he was in formation for the welcoming speech with the captain, and at the same time there were about 1,300 troops all on this formation. And as they were standing there waiting for the welcoming speech, what occurred was something really dramatic. There were some lights shining and flashing down at one end. They were in formation with Alpha Company first, then Bravo, then Charlie, and then finally Delta. John was in the Delta division. He looked down, and they were supposed to be facing forward in the attention, but people started running. And he began to watch the lights coming forward over Alpha. People were running, and it was total chaos. It moved up to Bravo, then Charlie, and finally to Delta. Obviously what was happening was really strange. John began to notice that the people who weren't running seemed to be frozen or asleep in formation, and he looked over at the captain. The captain, who was about to give a speech, was fast asleep, and the last thing John remembers is that he must have lost consciousness, because the next thing he knows is he was looking at his feet. One of the most amazing events that I've ever heard of. Namely that 1,300 troops were, or possibly 1,300 troops, were abducted on a UFO on this particular day. That's the first chapter of the book. The book goes through about 2 or 3, maybe 4 other major events that occurred during this 2-week period, and finally culminates at the end with an actual combat maneuver between the troops and a UFO. When I first met John and he told me the story, my first question, and I guess I wasn't really listening to him, was what did everybody think about after it happened? Well, in actuality, while this event occurred in 1977, John's recollection of it started in April of 1989 when he began having nightmares. Quite through some synchronicity, I had a chance to speak with a gentleman who was at Fort Benning in September of 1977 and said to me, "I have no knowledge of this event." And I said, "Well, it was in September." And he said, "September?" And he said to me, "You know, I don't remember anything about September." And I said, "Well, that seems normal to me, because after all, how many people can remember a particular month?" But as we talked, he became more and more agitated until finally we had to stop talking, because he was actually becoming almost on the verge of violence over this idea that he couldn't remember September. We've spoken since, and I don't even mention Fort Benning, and he has no recollection of the fact that we even talked about it. So it's a very strange thing. I think that there are a lot of troops out there who are having all kinds of physical and mental problems, but have not yet had that awakening experience that John had.
To read a book about one man and his extraordinary allegations, quite another to see that same man relate his story in front of the camera. See what you make of John as he describes some of the most telling moments from the incident at Fort Benning.
This female voice told me to go to sleep, and next thing happened is that this face, a male face, I know it was a male because that's what I felt, was telling me to look in his eyes. And the image that came across was that the first one was myself standing on an ocean all by myself, and there was a blue sky, and the next image was the whole planet being destroyed bits by bits. And the next image happened was a face, a human face, and his face was all pale, white, paste-like face. During this time, I saw Sergeant Turner, who was standing across me, and he was in a summer uniform, khakis. And I thought at that time, he sprayed coffee on his trousers, but apparently he had an accident. And some of us started falling down, as if we lost balance. And I fell down too, because everything seemed to have spinning around, and that was unusual. And when I got up, I started to walk away, and some of the people, or some of the guys who was in formation, started getting sick. They started vomiting and getting sick and falling down.
Few of the speakers at this year's 10th International Congress and Film Convention commanded the respect and admiration afforded to Dr. Roger Leir. In Hard Evidence 5, we included incredible footage of the surgical removal of an alleged alien implant by a team led by Dr. Leir. But what new evidence, we wanted to know, had he brought with him to Laughlin?
Well, they've kindly given me 2 hours to present some new material as well as review some of the older material on the implant surgeries, and I'm going to talk about some of the latest findings that we have on TIM surgery, which was performed February the 5th of the year 2000. The second hour, I'm going to broach a brand new subject and offer a theory why alien abductions are occurring worldwide. And I brought the statistics and graphical material to prove that the human race is undergoing a tremendous biological and change not only biologically but also in our consciousness. And I've done this by supporting 17 different developmental growth characteristics in children. And when I present this material, I expect the audience to prove that my statistics that I gathered in 1987 are going to be very, very conservative. And what I've done is to take a 40-year period, 1947 to 1987, and I'm going to point out 17 different developmental characteristics that have changed dramatically in 40 years. And this change far surpasses what is possible from a normal evolutionary trend. And also, since I've discussed this subject and have been taking notes for some years now, in other countries over the world, I've eliminated the possibility of environmental factors or health factors. So barring unknown changes in the planet or something that's unseen in evolution, the only possible explanation can be that the human race is being genetically manipulated, and we're beginning to now see the results of that. So that's what I'll be presenting in the second hour tomorrow afternoon, Friday, at 4:30 here at the UFO Congress, Laughlin, Nevada.
And just to focus on a couple of specific areas, we're talking about potential genetic manipulation through all classes and through all, it's not a boundary thing. We're talking about facts and statistics gleaned from areas around the world.
That's correct. The statistics are taken from books in the United States, but I've verified the same statistics in interviewing mothers, fathers, grandmothers, grandfathers, brothers, cousins about the children in everywhere from third world countries to places where the life is still very primitive without the influence of television. And I've looked into factors such as pollutants and the parents being influenced with drugs or alcohol. All these factors seem to have no place whatsoever in these statistics.
During our visit to Laughlin, we came across one individual, a scientist by profession who prefers anonymity at this present time, who handed over several videotapes after a private viewing. Little is known about the anomalous activity you're about to see, except that it was recorded in the utmost secrecy. Anomalous activity has also been filmed over the past 12 months here in the UK. Here are just a few brief examples.
Get it on tape. Where is it?
January of this year, residents of the town of Fleetwood in the northwest of England began observing anomalous activity over their homes. We travelled to the town to discover for ourselves just exactly what was going on.
The first time I saw them was on the 20th of January, and they were out above that bungalow there. 4 of them were together, and a 5th one came up and followed them and joined them above the roof of the house. And just sat there and didn't move, and there were these enormous orange globes. There was no sound, didn't make a move. It was as if they just parked up and took the keys out and cleared off. Because I'd just come back from the shop, and I was driving around the corner there, and they were just moving across. You couldn't miss them. They were so big, they were just there in the corner of my eye. And I thought, crikey, that helicopter's low. And then I realised it wasn't a helicopter, because the 5th light was independent of the other 4 and came up and joined the other 4. And they all just sat together. And I stood for about 7 or 8 minutes, and I walked in the middle of the road, and I'm looking like this, and there wasn't a sound, there was no noise. You could hear the street lights humming, but you couldn't hear those lights humming. There was nothing at all. There was nothing behind the lights, as if they were attached to a machine or anything. So I went in the house, and I said to my husband, just whip out the back door quick and have a look over the garden gate, tell me what you can see. So he went out, and his chin is his kneecaps, he couldn't believe it, and he just stood staring at them. Then he ran to get John, our neighbour here, and John came out, and they were still sat there, hadn't moved, and just as John went back in to get his telescope, they slowly started to move away to the north. But they were only treetop height. Where that tree is at the back of that bungalow is how high they were. And we still didn't ring, we didn't do anything about it, because we didn't want to get laughed at. And then exactly 5 weeks and 5 days later, it was on a Thursday, the first time was on a Saturday. My husband was on the front here with my little boy on a 2-wheeler bike. He's only 6, he can start but can't stop. My husband's running down the back of him like this. And instead of being that side of the road this time, they were above this row of houses. And they just came sailing in from the end of the street, right, all in a line, just in a line.
I come flying out, looked up and saw them above here with the moon sat behind them, shot back in, grabbed my scope, and just couldn't believe what I was seeing, and then just checked all 4 of them were okay. There was only 4 at this time. Checked they were all 4 was all right, they were the same, and then sort of locked onto one, and by holding my scope hard against the lamppost and getting a good solid position against it, so I've got something really supportive, and then tried to get it in my mind's eye exactly what I'd seen. But a single light. Not any strobing lights, not red and green for your wings, for your port and starboard. No strobing lights, which are now your flashing white lights, which you can see very, very clearly for, 30, 40 mile away at least. So no chance. I mean, like I've said, 30 odd years of spotting all over the world, Spain, America, Germany, France, Italy, all like that. Weird. I'd say they were pretty low. I mean, guessing that they were looking through the houses in the distance going over towards Barrow Way, maybe about 1,000 feet, something like that. Distance, no idea. I didn't get a clear picture of them at all, you know.
Any idea about estimated speed?
No, only that they were moving away, and again, they were, about the time I got my scope on them, to be really honest, I had just no idea. I mean, they could have been going slowly, they could have been going a bit quicker, I just don't know. But they were there for a fair bit of time, so I'd hazard a guess they were reasonably slow. Out I went, and these things were just right over the top of the house, and they were just unbelievable. And I mean, we've said about aircraft and everything else, no way. I mean, they weren't hot air balloons or anything. My very first, and I'll be honest, my very first instinct was hot air balloon, as I first got looked through the scope at it. But then I started checking all 5, there were 5 of them. I think there are 5 now, again my memory started going. But they were, I checked all the lot, I checked in each individual one, and then I checked one in particular, and they all looked the same. They all were like a big cylinder, white cylinder, like a parachute type material, as you might say. The moon was set behind, so it was showing through this material, as you might call it. And then in the base was like what you might call a candle light bulb. There was no flame or anything. It was just like a glow, and that was attached. It was like that, and it was attached to the bottom of this cylinder, and then it was like shaped like that in 4 separate like segments. Open at the top, open at the bottom. So there was not. That ruled out the hot air balloon theory straight out the window.
And then the 23rd of March was the last time we saw them, and I was looking through my window because now I sit with my vertical blinds set so I can see straight down the street, and I'm just sat like this looking out the window, and it was 7:45. It was when the adverts were on for Coronation Street, and I looked out the window and I saw in the distance to the north-northeast, that's right, north-northeast, this orange light coming this way. And I called my husband Danny and I said, just have a look at that. Is it a plane or is it one of them? And he looked and he said, no, it's a plane, definitely. And I said, well, it's orange and it's not strobing. So I went outside and walked down the driveway, and yes, it was one of them. And I shot back in and said, camcorder, quick, photograph, quick. And then we both came running out, at which point John next door had come out as well, and Brian next door but one, Jill, the policeman's wife from over the road, everybody was all out again. I managed to get them on camera, take photographs of them, and my husband got the video, and he filmed them all. We don't know what it was, we hadn't a clue what it was, but then they just sort of pulsated, strobe, popped and disappeared.
What do you think it might have been that you filmed?
I'm not quite sure. As you said before, I'd missed the previous occasion, and because they weren't, quite impressive, they weren't as close as last time, I didn't feel that nervous, and that's why I managed to keep a straight hand. But to tell you the truth, to know what they were, I haven't got a clue. I mean, we have helicopters around here. The odd one goes out because we're so close to the coast here, and people get in trouble. So we know what helicopter sounds like and looks like, and we get plenty of aircraft crossing over. But what this was extraordinary. That's why everyone came out in the street to see what they were, because they were going so slowly, these big orange balls, that people had never seen them before in their life, and they'd like to know what it was. People we've met have around here seen the lights. It's something very common, but it's just this little nick, this little area, which is strange. Oh, the battery's always on charge now.
Well, it's definitely not helicopters. It's definitely not a mechanical plane. I don't know of any other kind of plane that we make down here that doesn't make a noise. They weren't balloons, because balloons can't take up formation. Whatever it was under some kind of control to be able to take up formation like they did and just stop in the sky and not move and then just set off again willy-nilly. They were under some kind of control. Wasn't balloons, wasn't helicopter, I don't know what it was, but what I think it was is not of this earth.
As we end this edition of Hard Evidence, do check out our previews of other great video titles, now available exclusively through UFO Magazine. Until the next time, keep watching those skies, because rest assured, the truth is coming.
There's a slow-moving object up here, Al. White object in the sky.
What?
It's like a small star moving across the sky. It's very small. See it up there? I don't know if I can get in focus there. I'm going to pan back.
There's two of them.
Where?
There's two. There's one.
Oh, there is. There's one behind. 3, 4, 5. They're all in. Oh my God! There's loads of them.
They've just.
I've got them on tape.
Disappearing in the orbit now.
There's one ahead. There's one ahead of all the others. See them there, and there's one up there.
Oh, they're all in the line.
They're like a formation.
Yeah, there's two together up there, look.
Oh my God, I've got to...
There's loads of them.
I hope I get them on tape. I hope I can get these. They're that small and faint. See them? They're like glowing and...
They're looking the toss.
Can you see?
Oh look, there's a V.
Oh my God. Jesus.
Oh!
Wow, there's more of them. Look at them up there.
There's Tony.
Tony, get up here, look. There's millions of them. Oh my God, look at that. Look at that. There's millions of them. See them?
Where?
Look, up there, there's the cloud.
Oh, yeah.
Look, there's loads. There's thousands. Oh, well, there's at least 20 or 30. Oh my God. I hope I can get this.
Bird.
Jesus Christ, there's formations of them. See them all, Tony?
Yeah.
They're all moving around.
Yeah,
oh, jeez. Look, they're all moving in different directions.
Loads of them.
Oh. Quick, kids, come out here.
Quick.
Look, there's loads of UFOs in the sky. Look, they're all over here.
Look,
see all the little like stars. Up in the sky by the cloud.
Look, you've got to really focus.
There's loads of them.
I can't see nothing. Can I have a look at that? I can't see nothing. Let me see.
I'm that excited. They're all moving into the cloud and...
Into a right close together, them two.
I've seen the one at first, up there. Look, it's that cloud up there. Look, see them all.
I can't see nothing.
Look carefully. Look, see all the like little stars going into the cloud.
Yeah, I can see some. No, I can't see nothing.
Oh.
So let me have a look in there.
What about Richard? Where is he?
Rich?
Oh no.
Richard?
There's two of them.
Where?
There's two. There's one.
Oh, there is. There's one behind. 3, 4, 5. They're all in. Oh my God, there's loads of them.
They've just.
I've got them on tape.
Disappearing in the orbit now.
There's one ahead. There's one ahead of all the others. See them there, and there's one up there.
Oh, they're all in the line.
They're like a formation.
Yeah, there's two together up there, look.
Oh my God, I've got to...
There's loads of them.
I hope I get them on tape. I hope I can get these. They're that small and faint. See them? They're like glowing and...
They're looking the toss.
Can you see?
Oh look, there's a V.
Oh my God. Jesus.
Oh!
Wow, there's more of them. Look at them up there.
There's
Tony! Tony, get up here, look! There's millions of them!